Hello, welcome everyone to today's episode of Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. I'm Sally Ganga from College Coach. Happy fall. It's a sunny, crisp fall day here in Connecticut. It's finally acting like fall instead of 70 degrees in November. But I hope everybody's enjoying the beautiful weather. This will be a really fun show. Our second segment will be with Bo Benson, admission officer at Northeastern. He'll be telling us about all their different campuses and programs. And for the third segment, College Coach finance expert Wally Boudet will be telling us about quirky scholarships. There are some strange ones out there, so this should be entertaining. But first, and those of you who are watching this on YouTube or from our website, you'll see that right on the screen is Michael Simons, attorney and partner at CMBG3 to the third power law firm in Boston, who is here to talk to us about becoming an attorney. So welcome, Michael.
Hey, Sally, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So, really interested in hearing your perspective really broadly, but I think first and foremost, it would be good if students knew generally what it meant to be an attorney, because I think they get all their information from television. Like they think that if you're good at arguing with your parents, then you should be a lawyer. Like I hear that all the time. And because my own mother was a lawyer, I'm quite aware that it's actually more writing. And I was like, she said, actually being a good writer is even more helpful than being a good in-person arguer, although there's certainly a place for that too. So what are some of the things you think people should be aware of if they're considering becoming an attorney?
Sure. For me, the most pressing thing if you want to be an attorney, I think, is to the way you approach problem solving. It's got to be methodical. You want to, think about how am I going to, deal with this problem? What are the pros? What are the cons? A lot of the times, and it depends very much so on what area of law you end up going into. Mm-hmm. Whether you are that courtroom person or whether you are the person say, no, I'm more comfortable, drawing up contracts, or no, I might be more comfortable, researching and writing, motions, doing motion practice. It really, to me, the biggest thing comes down to is how do you take a problem? How do you try to look at it from all different angles so that you can give good counseling to your clients, and give them advice on, look, this is how I think you should handle this. Mm-hmm.
I would think it would be also very important to be able to explain to all different kinds of people the pros and cons of everything.
You do very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, the term for you're often referred to as a counselor,
mm-hmm.
and that's the way you're often referred to sometimes in court. And that's exactly what you're doing. You are offering, it's not always, standing up in court, pointing the finger at someone and saying, he did it, he did it, and you should find him guilty. It's really a lot of the time is doing exactly like being a counselor, advising your clients on, look, this is what you need to think about, when you're dealing with this particular issue or this particular case. And these are the possible, ramifications if you go this way or if you go that way. Mm-hmm. And saying, and a lot of times to me, it's important not just to simply point out all the possibilities, but to give them at the end of the day advice on, look, based on everything, this is what I think you should do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But supporting them whether they follow your advice or not.
Absolutely, and that's inevitable, and that's fine. I mean, I think I deal with a lot of sometimes insurance carriers for part of the work I do, and one of the things that I've always heard from them, and it's most critical, is they don't care if you make a recommendation and they disagree with it. Mm-hmm. That's going to happen, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. But what they want is you to look at the situation, make a recommendation, take a stand, and they're going to respect that, and clients will respect that much more than if you simply say, well, you could do this or you could do that, you could do A or could do B, mm-hmm. and it's up to you. They know it's up to them. Mm-hmm. What they want to hear is, okay, I've looked at the options. Here's what I think your best bet is. Here's what I recommend you do. Mm-hmm. And they'll be much more impressed with you and much happier with your service, mm-hmm. if you actually do that, as opposed to just being wishy-washy.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's not that dissimilar from what we do, where I'm like, okay, what's your goal?
Right.
Like, what's your goal? Like, we have to start with what your goal is. And then here's my recommendation. And then, I would say a good 50% of the time students don't follow it, or they'll follow it partially, which is fine. It's their process, and that's good. But I think that you're actually right that they like to hear some more concrete advice if they can get it. If they're clear about their own goals, then usually that's something I can do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are things that I would think particularly college students can do to prepare themselves to be a good candidate for law school?
So, one of the great things about law school is, unlike, let's say, medical school, there is no core requirement, set
Mhm.
path that you need to have. You don't have to take organic and inorganic
Mhm.
chemistry. Law school,
Thankfully, right?
thankfully, exactly, which was part of the reason why I never became a doctor. But honestly, you know, I've known people who have followed so many different paths before they ended up in law and in law school. So it doesn't matter if you are a history major or an economics major. I know people who have engineering backgrounds, which actually turns out to be pretty useful if you want to do certain areas of law,
Mhm.
like patent and trademark law. The engineering background is fantastic.
Mhm.
I had a political science background. It really it's a great thing that there is no set path. And I think that what that allows you to do is when you're in college, once you've taken care of the core requirements that you need to take care of that are set by your school, you can experiment and you can
Mhm.
you know boldly go into these different areas and try out different things and do what makes you happy and what you think you might find interesting.
Mhm.
And then if you decide that law school is the path you want to go down, it doesn't matter. Whatever
Mhm.
background you have is going to be okay.
Mhm.
Are there certain things that are helpful, or activities? Look, if your thought is, hey, I want to be a litigator. If you know in your heart say, hey, look, I want to be the guy, I want to be the person standing up in a courtroom and arguing cases, then yeah, join your debate team.
Mhm.
If you think, hey, I'm more interested in trying to negotiate, resolutions, among parties who are in conflict. Well, then something like Model UN.
Mhm.
That's kind of an interesting path, to get some experience in and get a feel for conflict resolution. And once you're in law school, it's everyone has a certain core requirements that they have to take. So there will be contracts and torts and property law and criminal law and constitutional law, and that takes up probably the first year to year and a half of the 3-year law school program.
Mhm.
The reason they do that is quite frankly, it's again the same idea of I think a core in college, which is expose you to a whole bunch of areas, and that will help you figure out, okay, this interests me, this doesn't. It certainly worked for me. I mean, I came through it and said, okay, yeah, I don't want to do criminal law. It's not for me.
Mhm.
But then again, but on the other hand, it's like, oh, I really enjoy civil procedure and I love, torts. So
Mhm.
maybe that's the area I should go into.
Mhm. Yeah, I think people think often students think they know what they want to do, but they
Mhm.
haven't been exposed to everything. I mean, how could you know more
Exactly.
broadly,
Yeah.
So, um, now, are there people who should or shouldn't pursue a career in law? I'm just kind of curious if you have a sense of that. Like, are there, I mean, I know that it might be hard to predict, but are there people who kind of went to law school, started in law? Is there any consistent pattern with those who started in law and said, I don't want to do this?
I don't know if there's a consistent pattern, but I think like any job out there are times when you maybe you find yourself thinking it's not what it was going to be, or maybe just
Mhm.
the area of law that you're practicing is not quite what you wanted. And yeah, people, it's inevitable. There are always going to be people who say, gee, this isn't really what I want to do with my life. I don't want to practice law. But the one thing I've always said about that is that the reason why law school is kind of great is I think I alluded to earlier that part of law school, what it does is teach you how to creatively think about problem solving
Mhm.
and think about different ways to approach problems that you're faced with. A law degree is wonderful if you want to practice law. It's necessary, but it's a wonderful thing to have because of the way that they train your mind. It's applicable in so many other areas. So if you get your law degree and you say, boy, maybe you practice, maybe you don't practice, but you say, I don't want to practice, or I don't enjoy it. I don't really like being a lawyer, a traditional lawyer. You've still got a phenomenal background to go into business.
Mhm.
You've got a phenomenal background to provide counsel to other businesses or other companies. It's I've seen people with law degrees do a whole variety of things. It's you don't have to think of it as, well, if I go to law school, I must practice law and be a litigator. Not
Mhm.
at all.
Mhm.
Not at all.
Yeah, I actually have a friend who works on Wall Street doing, I think, like risk assessment, which her
Sure.
law background is very helpful for.
Yep. Yep.
So,
That's a huge thing. People end up in, whether it's Wall Street, insurance companies,
mhm,
risk assessment is a huge area that, again, you're not technically practicing law.
mhm,
You're not looking up cases and doing that, but you've been trained to think a certain way and to approach problem solving a certain way that's really applicable across the board.
mhm, mhm. All right, but now let's get on to kind of some of the tougher stuff. Like, absolutely, I think law school can be useful in so many different ways, but there have been gluts in the past of lawyers, and it looks like there might be another glut, right? And so let's talk about, like, do we need more lawyers? Is it a good idea to go to law school? And I know that depends on the person, but what would you say are some of the pros and cons?
Sure. Honestly, there will always be waves. I think it's inevitable in any profession. There's going to be periods where, hey, this is the hot thing. There are tons of jobs, people are hiring, and then you get to a point where no, there's a bit of a glut now, and it's going to cool off a bit. We've seen that before in the legal profession. I mean, certainly, there have been times when I said, oh, why don't they just close the law schools for for 2 years or 3 years, and and then let everything catch up. But I wouldn't worry about it. I really wouldn't. If anyone who's looking at colleges now, well, okay, that's 4 years. It's 4 years from now before you even start law school.
Mhm,
Add 3 more years to that to get through law school. Isn't it? We're now talking. There's a glut, potentially, coming down the pike right now. Okay, but someone who's coming into college now is not going to be even looking at the legal job market for 7 years
mhm,
from now. And I don't think anyone is predicting that it's all doom and gloom, come 7 years from now.
mhm,
Uh, there will always be cycles. There will always be jobs, and there always will be opportunities. Now, they may not be in the areas that you thought you'd end up in. For example, just to personalize it, when I was in law school, I took, after I got through my core requirements, I took a bunch of courses about dealt with healthcare law,
mhm,
and that was really what I was interested in, what I thought I was going to end up doing. Um, lo and behold, what's my first job out of law school? It's not in healthcare law,
mhm,
and and then I realized, oh gee, I'm not doing what I thought I was going to be doing, but I'm enjoying it.
mhm,
And it kind of set me on my path. And then, over the years, I've worked in all different types of areas, and have actually had the opportunity to do some work in healthcare law as well.
mhm. I
But
think, oh, go ahead.
but I would never worry about, well, gee, the job market in the next year or two doesn't look good. They're predicting it's not going to be good for lawyers.
Mhm,
Well, that's okay. One,
yeah,
you're not in law school right now,
yeah,
and two, there are always new areas of law being developed.
mhm,
Always new areas of law that are coming to the forefront. Just as technology advances, there's going to
mhm,
be new areas that people haven't practiced in before.
mhm,
So there will always be something out there.
mhm. Yeah, the government doesn't really know what to do with all the advances in Silicon Valley. I mean,
Yeah,
they're lagging far behind something, so I think I would put in a caveat. I mean, well, please feel free to push back on this, but I've read about sort of law school diploma mills. So, if you can go to like a kind of, it doesn't have to be an Ivy. You know what I mean? There's a lot of good law schools out there, but there are law schools that are where the rate of passage of the bar exam is very, very low. Things, I mean, there's always going to be people who fail no matter how good the law school, but like the passage rate is low. Those I would caution students about taking on a lot of debt. Like, do you
I,
have any thoughts about that?
I do. So I was I'm a product of, I went to a private undergrad. Uh, I went to Brown University in Rhode Island, and then I went to University of Florida for law school. And
Mm-hmm.
part of the reason I went to University of Florida, it was twofold. One, it was a lot less expensive, you know, even as an out-of-stater.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate that, and I don't know if this is the situation anymore. I've been out for practicing for about 30 years, but after my first semester of law school, I was able to get in-state tuition,
Mm-hmm.
and then my tuition dropped even more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is critical. It doesn't matter. And what's always been important to me is it doesn't really matter where you go; it's what you put into it.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a firm believer that you can get a phenomenal, you know, legal education at a state school. You know,
Mhm.
you don't have to go to Harvard Law. You don't have to go to Yale.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
and quite frankly, with all due respect, a lot of the attorneys that some of the attorneys I've known, the best attorneys have gone to schools that I've worked with or have had cases against, have gone to law schools that weren't considered, you know, oh, the elite, you know, law schools.
Mhm.
They come from all walks of life.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, my mother went to Loyola Marymount Law School, which is a very fine law school, but not, it's not Yale. You're not getting Supreme Court justice clerkships, which who cares? That's not what she wanted to do anyway.
Right, right.
So she did just fine with that particular degree. So,
I was going to say, I think it's really critical. It's not where you go, it's what you put into it.
mhm.
That really is the most important thing. I think wherever you go, you're going to end up, and I feel the same way about, I'm talking about college a little bit, but, wherever you go, if you put the time in, you will find your friends there. You will find your people. You will find your path.
Mhm.
It's, having a fancy name on a degree might get you initial interview that you may or may not have gotten otherwise, but that's as far as it gets you.
Mhm.
Beyond that, you still have to, you have to do the work. You have to be good. You have to know what you're doing. You have to be responsible. It doesn't matter, if I, walk in with my, a fancy degree from, Columbia Law, but I'm not very good.
Mhm.
Great. Maybe I got an interview, or maybe I got my first job because I had a fancy, degree behind me, but it's not going to keep you working. It's not going to keep you practicing.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the case from for undergrad too. So, I guess with just one last kind of thing, I mean, do you have any sort of sense of maybe best or worst things about being a lawyer? Like, I mean, you can speak completely personally on this because
Sure.
everybody's going to have a different opinion. Like, what are and I realize you're a working lawyer, so maybe your law firm does, you might have to, you
I,
can't say your colleagues, right? But just in general, what are some of the best things about being a lawyer, and maybe some things to think about if you're thinking about joining the law?
Sure. So one, I am very fortunate that I really do love my colleagues. So, and I mean that they're great.
Mhm.
I'm very fortunate. Um, uh, to me, it's the things that I really enjoy. For example, I really enjoy cross-examining witnesses, whether it's at a deposition or a trial. It's, for me, it's fun. It's fun to basically take their testimony, take the documents that get produced in the course of a discovery in a case, and figure out ways to prove my client's position, and to dig into and really take apart someone else on the stand. I know it sounds mean, but it's actually it's pretty fun.
Mhm.
One of the things that I really enjoy as well is I enjoy working with my clients pretty closely. I enjoy working with expert witnesses, which I do quite a bit. And part of the reason I really enjoy that is it's a learning process. So I do a lot of toxic tort litigation. And as a result, I've had to learn, principles of engineering and principles of toxicology and principles of mineralogy and medical things that, hey, I didn't go to med school, but suddenly I know a heck of a lot about about lung function, and lung related diseases. It's I'm always learning something. So that's the thing I like best about my practice.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It does seem like one of those jobs where you're always going to be learning something.
It is. And are there days when I sit there and I say, oh, why did I do this? Why didn't I do something else? Why didn't I become a vet? Sure. But you're going to have that with any job. There are always going to be days when I think you're going to feel it's a grind.
Mhm.
It happens. It happens, but it's going to happen whether you're a practicing attorney. It's going to happen whether you're a physician. It's going to happen whether you are a teacher.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
All right. Well, listen, thank you
yeah.
so much, Michael. This has been
Oh,
great.
my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay. Now we're going to take a short break, and when we return, I'll be talking with Bo Benson of Northeastern University.